So, I've talked about wanting to start this company because of a few different reasons. One being my daughter, one being sort of the state of the industry in terms of how people of marginalized backgrounds are currently being treated in society. And I think one of the other reasons that we talk about is the fact that there's a need in the market for qualified practitioners. And I mean, you've hired consultants, you've been doing this 15 plus
Yeah.
years, right? So, I mean, you've seen a lot. What's your opinion on the state of the market and what you're seeing with DI practitioners today that are just jumping in?
I think part of the challenge that I'm seeing is uh, there are a lot of people with all kinds of fancy titles uh, that have endless amount of information and resources. The challenge I'm seeing with that same cohort though is their ability to engage in knowledge transfer, right? It's one thing to say, you know what, I've got a degree in this, I've got masters in this, I've got a PhD in this. It's another thing to be able to do that knowledge transfer, right? Usually, what happens is, and this is part of the challenge that we're seeing in the industry, is there are all kinds of people wanting to, let's say, engage in dialogue and in learning and in teaching and engagement. But you need to be able to develop a strategy that allows your audience to embrace your message. And I'm sure we've all seen scenarios where somebody's talking, and while they're talking, you're off somewhere else in your mind, where you're thinking, okay, so when I get home, I've got to make sure I let the dog out, and I've got to get this done. Oh yeah, and I have to call Aunt Susie by 8 o'clock, and blah 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 blah. And the person is still going on, and you haven't embraced anything that they've said, or they've said it in a way that you don't even understand what they've said. And I feel like that's what the market is almost, I won't say flooded with, but it's almost to the point where it's flooded with people who have all kinds of credentials but don't have the ability to engage in knowledge transfer. For me, I may not have their credentials, but if you spend time with me, you will leave my audience saying, I get it, whatever it is. You will leave thinking, my perspective has changed. And it takes a special person, not to say that I'm special, but I guess maybe I'm a little special. It takes a special person to be able to take their knowledge and transfer it so that when you leave, you look at your partner or whoever's beside you and say, I get it. I understand exactly what he's talking about. And that's where what the market is not flooded with is practitioners that have the ability to engage in knowledge transfer. And if you don't engage in knowledge transfer, then you're not helping change whether it be the culture of a corporation, whether it be just if it's a singular person that's in your audience, you're not able to engage that knowledge transfer that allows them to have a different perspective than when they first came in. And that should be your end goal. When I have an audience in front of me, my end goal, and I say this all the time, my end goal is that every person that is in the room needs to leave with at least an ounce of perspective they didn't consider when they came in the door. And if there's one person, I don't care how big the audience is, let's say it's an audience of 100, I'm doing this big presentation in front of an audience of 100, I will have failed you. I will have failed my audience if there's one person in that 100 that has left me and not had at least an ounce of perspective change. I will have failed them. Now, other people would say, well, Keith, if you reach 99 out of 100, I think that's a win-win-win as far as I'm concerned. For me, that's a failure. I need to know that every person has at least had a little bit. Now, some people will leave and it will be more grandiose where they've left and said, that was life-changing. Other people will say, I took some parts from it and thank you very much, and now I've got some tools. But if there's anybody in my audience, so let's say I have 100, who says, I got nothing from that, I have failed. Even out of a group of 100. You need to be able to engage in knowledge transfer. That should be your end goal. And you need to have 100% saturation of that knowledge transfer to your audience.
That's amazing. And here's the other thing. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people who are jumping in simply based on lived experience. And they're the ones designing sort of infrastructures for companies
Yeah.
around how they should be doing DEI. And they bring some of their own personal biases
Absolutely.
into that design structure versus a holistic view, which is what we believe in, is how are we
Yeah.
designing not for one group or one marginalized community, but as a whole. What are your thoughts on people designing like this?
The challenge that we have with that scenario is those practitioners are delivering what works for them. When I go into that scenario, I'm thinking I need to design or develop something that works for you. I'm not thinking what works for me. I'm thinking what works for you. Usually, the disconnect is that they're thinking I'm a racialized person or whatever their background is. It doesn't have to be race, but I'm somebody that reflects a specific demographic, and this is how I got through life successful. I did the A, B, C, and D. I was exposed to this. I went to school for this.
Right.
And now I'm going to take all that is me, that has made me successful, and I'm going to use that to deliver it to this group or this corporation or this organization. That's usually where the failure comes. I'm thinking, if Keith Richards shows up, I need to know what will allow you to be successful, not use what made me successful. Because I'm a different person, and whatever made me successful works for me. I need to know what works for you. So it's about me being the chameleon and transitioning my approach and everything that makes me Keith Richards so that I can fit your needs. But most practitioners don't do that. They think, this is what made me successful. I'm going to use this lived experience and everything else, and then away I go. It's the wrong approach. Right? We're the professional, so we should be doing the transitioning based on the person or the client or the community or the group.